We produce the Global Perspective Speaker Series to stimulate discussion and inspire action around the world's greatest challenges. Topics are selected based on a blend of community input from individuals such as yourselves and from contemporary global conversations. The series wouldn't be possible without our donors, sponsors, ticket and series pass holders such as yourselves. So thank you for being here and for supporting. And also thank you to the Fairmont Chateau Whistler and Vail Resorts Epic Promise for your ongoing support. Some housekeeping. Please make sure your phones are on silent. This event is being recorded. The video will be added to the Whistler Institute's website. There will be a Q&A following the talk, and we'll bring a microphone around for those of you who have questions. And restrooms are downstairs for those of you who are not familiar with our venue. So back to that catchphrase, the world's greatest challenges. It's got a lot of weight to it. While we cannot in good conscience claim to have solutions, what we do have in this room is an opportunity to create space for meaningful dialogue, observing the figurative snags in our social fabric to find inspirational threads that we can collectively or as individuals choose to pull, potentially leading to positive change. To start us on this journey together is Corporal Retired Lealand Muller. Lealand is from Winnipeg, Manitoba. He was an Army vehicle technician for 8 years and was posted to Shilo, Manitoba. In 2018, Lealand sustained a catastrophic injury while tobogganing that left him paralyzed from the waist down. No longer able to serve in the military and left with many unknowns of what the future may hold, he fell into a dark depression. Searching for hope and answers, Lealand was awarded the opportunity to wear the Canadian flag once more to represent his country and compete at the 2023 Invictus Games Düsseldorf. Participating in those games was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that gave Lealand a new perspective on life. He's been able to push past mental and physical obstacles sustained from his injury. He learned from other competitors at the games with similar experiences and benefited from that one-of-a-kind, tough love and never-give-up mindset found within the military community. Being a part of the adaptive sport community has done wonders for Lealand's mental and physical health. Using his experience as a wheelchair user and Invictus alumnus, he hopes to bring awareness to people with disabilities and make meaningful change in the built environment regarding accessibility across Canada. Lealand now works with the Invictus Games Organizing Committee in Vancouver, and he hopes to make the 2025 Invictus Games in Vancouver and Whistler as accessible and inclusive as possible. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome to the stage Corporal Retired Lealand Muller.
Picture this, you're ground level, right smack dab in the middle of a 54,000 seat soccer stadium. You're backstage preparing to be introduced in order of country. Your team is third in line behind Australia and Belgium. You hear, Canada! But before you even step 1 foot, 20,000 people are cheering for you. 20,000 people that have no idea who you are and only recognizable by the maple leaf on your shoulder. People from all over the world are cheering you on and for the country you represent, for the sacrifices you made and were prepared to make in service of your country, for the lengths you went to and were prepared to go to in service of your country. People from all over the world are cheering you on as you summit this mountain that is the stage, which represents all of the blood, sweat, and tears it has taken to get to this point. You reach the top, and all you can think of and feel is, I've arrived. I did it.
Canada. We began the Parade of Nations with a country that hosted the Games in 2018. We now turn to the nation that will host the next Invictus Games, Canada. Their 32 competitors have come to Germany, knowing that in 2 years' time, Invictus will head to Vancouver Whistler, 8 years after the Toronto 2017 Games, and with winter adaptive sports set to feature for the first time. The Soldier On programme has been instrumental in the Canadians' participation here in Dusseldorf. It's part of the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group, and the Canadian public has donated over $6 million during the lifetime of the Soldier On programme, which has gone directly to ill and injured members of the Canadian Armed Forces. And the choice of music, Ordinary Day, by a Great Big Sea, a Canadian folk rock band. Ordinary Day for an extraordinary team.
They are rocking that music, aren't they? What a moment.
Thank you for Canada!
Alison, isn't it a wonderful feature of the Parade of Nations to have the team song chosen by each delegation?
Absolutely, absolutely. It adds something extra special to this Parade of Nations. Look at the faces, fantastic.
For a lot of these athletes, they're getting underway first thing tomorrow with an early start to competition. So many athletes doing more than one event and more than one sport.
A couple of new sports as well. We have adaptive table tennis for the first time, which will be fun to watch.
Good evening, everyone. I am Corporal Retired Lealand Muller, and those were the moments leading up to an event that would change my life forever. What event, you're wondering? Well, we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, my journey leading up to the Games. We'll start with my growing up as a child, my career in the military, my injury and learning to walk again, my experience of the Games and what the Games has taught me, how parasports has impacted my life, my future in parasports, and the 2025 Invictus Games. Growing up, I was involved in a variety of sports, playing soccer, volleyball, and basketball, just to name a few, but often reckless at times and dangerous, constantly trying to prove to myself and others that I could do something I probably shouldn't be trying. I love to challenge my mental toughness and physical ability. This curiosity into my own ability led me to a career in the Canadian Armed Forces. I joined the military in 2014 at 20 years old. I served for 8 years as a mechanic. I had the opportunity to work on some really cool equipment and drive some really big vehicles. I worked on everything from chainsaws to tanks. If you put gas in it and it goes vroom, I've probably worked on it. I had the opportunity to travel all over the country and make friends from coast to coast. I have a friend in every province. I traveled for a variety of reasons, whether it was a course, a training exercise, or a military sporting event. I had the opportunity to challenge my mental and physical toughness by competing and completing a grueling 50-kilometer race called Mountain Man.
Before sunrise, more than 250 soldiers began the 2019 Mountain Man race.
They first ran a 32-kilometer route up and down the river valley with a 15-kilogram rucksack on their back, 35 pounds.
Then a portage, bringing their total weight load up to about 75 pounds.
When you finish that 30-plus kilometer march and you put the canoe on your back for the portage, that 40 or 50-pound canoe, it feels like a lot more.
2 race volunteers help load on the boat, and for the next 3.5 kilometers, racers must be extremely strategic if they need to unload.
Rep 124!
The second place finisher says getting the canoe back on yourself is nearly impossible.
You can wedge the canoe into a tree or something that you can find, so it creates so it stays up. But if you don't do that, or if you take a break at the wrong spot, then you're on your own in order to put it back up.
A 10.5-kilometer paddle down the North Saskatchewan River followed. Curious bystanders often shouted their support.
I spoke with a few of them, like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, oh, we're doing a race for the Canadian Army. And she's like, oh, how far are you going? I was like, oh, about 50 kilometers. And some of them were a little blown away.
And the cheers continued as the soldiers finished the last 5 kilometers of the race.
I completed that race in 7 hours and 18 minutes. And I still remember the overwhelming feeling of accomplishment. I remember telling myself, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, I can't do as long as I put my mind to it. However, in a few short years, I would be up against my most difficult challenge yet. And I would need to remind myself of how capable I truly am. You see, in life, all the decisions and actions you make have consequences. Every decision you make will affect you at some point in your life. It may not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen for 5 to 10 years from now. But someday, you're going to look back on those moments in your life where you had an opportunity to make a decision and go left or go right. In those moments, take a step back and think, can I be hurt with what I'm about to do? Or hurt others with what I'm about to do? The decision that changed my life was on February 19th, 2018. I decided to celebrate my birthday by doing an activity I've always enjoyed, tobogganing. And given my thrill-seeking nature, I decided to go down head first. So I closed my eyes, crossed my arms, and I just let fate take over. I wound up hitting a tree, and my world went dark. I knew immediately that I was unable to move my legs. No feeling and no movement in my legs. I remember being extremely upset and terrified. The thought of spending the rest of my life in a wheelchair terrified me. For many, the thought of losing the use of your legs would mean life would be too difficult to live. I was rushed immediately into emergency surgery, where doctors spent the next 8 hours fusing 3 vertebrae in my back. It was not a call any mother wants to get. To hear that their son has been rushed into emergency surgery because of an injury that would now affect them for the rest of their life. I've put my mom through a lot over the years. 5 months prior to that, I was involved in a car accident, and luckily I only sustained some minor bruising. And this is why I say the decisions you make in life don't just affect you, but those who love you as well. The constant struggles with this disability complicate even the bare essentials of life, like cooking and cleaning and bathing. But we must find a way to accomplish everyday tasks and goals. Despite the path that I had been on had taken a sudden detour, and I was now faced with unexpected new challenges and obstacles, I felt like I had hit rock bottom. But not the rock bottom you hear about in movies and read about in books, the basement of rock bottom. Blacker than black. About a week after my accident, once I was finally stabilized, doctors sat me down and they told me it was unlikely that I would ever walk again. They also told me I had a 25% chance, and those are some pretty good odds. I would take those on the lottery any day. And that's all I needed to hear. I had my answer. Instead of spending the rest of my life being miserable and feeling sorry for myself, I was going to make the most out of my situation and choose to work towards a new goal of learning to walk again, and hopefully live life with a greater appreciation for all it has to offer. Now, you may not see my face in that video, but I can tell you that I am using every ounce of my ability to not only think about what I'm doing, but what I'm going to be doing next. Stroke after stroke, an exhausting task that we most oftentimes take for granted. I was able to do that after 7 months in hospital. And after 5 years of intense therapy to strengthen my core and upper body strength,
Yeah.
and that's how the road to recovery went. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Words I've had to keep reminding myself each and every day. Every day I went to therapy, I knew that I would roll into there with the likelihood that I wouldn't walk out when I was done. I would be faced with challenges not easily overcome, knowing full well that I might fail at therapy that day. But I chose to show up anyway. Because when you continue to show up, you can't help but get closer to your goals.
Yep.
Look at that. Turn around, walk back a little bit. Yeah. And able to do that after 6 years. In that moment, I chose to believe in myself and my ability to achieve any goal I create for myself. Along the way, people told me I shouldn't bother, that it was a failed cause. Just get on with your life as a permanent wheelchair user. It has taken me 6 years to get to that point where I am now, and I still have a long way to go. But if I give up now, there is a 100% chance I won't reach my goal. Now, one can only maintain this level of motivation for so long. My ability to see my accomplishments faded. Progress seemed less and less visible over time. I sank into a deep, dark depression. I hadn't achieved my goal in the time frame I would have liked. Unmotivated, discouraged, and terrified. Is this it? Is this as good as it's going to get? I may never walk again. And that's still a possibility. No matter the attempts I make in therapy, I still may never walk again. But we don't worry until the outcome. We must keep pushing and finding ways to reach our goals. We must find a way to get a little bit closer each day. Lost and unsure of what the future would hold, I was desperate for hope, looking for a way to regain my identity. But I was up against a mountain that felt like it kept getting higher and higher over time, constantly having to motivate myself to keep pushing and not give up. Some days were harder than others. Some days I just needed a push. And that's when I had the opportunity to compete at the Invictus Games. The games are for members of the military, retired and/or serving. They're for the ill and injured. It's an international sporting event with, at the time, had 21 countries participating. It's a different type of therapy. And because we're not all the same, we process info and trauma differently. The games helps us find a new way to help ourselves. It's an opportunity to overcome injury and illness through sport. We respect each other and the journey each of us has been on. It was a home for respect and a way to regain our sense of self and identity. There were 10 sports to choose from, each with various adaptive categories for competitors to compete in. Powerlifting consisted of bench press. Seated volleyball was volleyball but on the ground. Swimming and archery with various adaptations. Rowing was indoor rowing on a rowing ergometer. Cycling, there were bicycles and tricycles categories. Wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby, as well as table tennis, or oftentimes referred to as ping pong. And athletics, track and field. My experience. The games themselves are a week-long event with competitions each day. 21 countries, 550 competitors, 10 different sports. I competed in discus throwing, hand cycling, and wheelchair basketball. Sports I've never done before in my entire life. I trained for 6 months in environments and activities completely out of my comfort zone. I had to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, a skill I had learned from my career in the military. I had to be okay with failure while learning a new sport. Prior to my injury, I was used to succeeding almost immediately in every sport I've ever tried and being better than average. This was not the case. In discus, I had 2 really good practice throws, and all 3 of my actual throws were out of bounds. In cycling, I competed in 2 different races.
This is James Barker of Adelaide, Australia. Away goes a Colombian, Camilo Castellanos Sanchez. This is Lealand Muller of Canada from Winnipeg. He's keen to push through mental barriers he's created for himself. That's why he's at these Invictus Games. Gael from France, out there too, still going pretty well in the IHB1 category. Muller really searching for oxygen and what's a grueling event. Next in the IHB2 riders is away Brent Garlick of the United States. So here comes Muller. Almost there. Well done, Lealand Muller.
I came dead last in both. In basketball, we had 4 games.
Robert Gilmore unable to reach the ball. Turnover. The ball will go back to Team Unconquered 1. Kevin Koika with some room to go. Look out. Kevin loves shooting in pure motion, and he does. Knew exactly what he was doing. Had that flow, got to the middle of the floor, and Kevin Koika now with 10 points to lead all scorers in this game. What fluid motion for Koika, and that was a big bucket.
What a pass. We lost all 4 games. Despite my performance, I'm still proud of myself because I showed up and I didn't give in to self-doubt and fear of performing. Unfortunately, disappointment is a part of life. Given how I performed, I could have given up on sport. I had every reason to be upset and frustrated. Instead, I've chosen to use it as a learning experience. I've chosen to learn what I should have done differently. I've chosen to continue with some of the sports, and I'm willing to discover new ones. Like I said, despite my performance, my overall experience was positive. I had time to cheer on my teammates, and I had the opportunity to meet others from all over the world, oftentimes losing track of time as we discover similarities in our journeys, finding ways to cope and overcome our injuries and illnesses, discovering that we are not all that different. For myself, getting on that plane was my first small but important victory. Being stuck on that 8-hour flight was extremely uncomfortable, and the risk of a pressure sore was a real concern. For others, their small victories were different. They may have been sensitive to light and needed to wear sunglasses inside in order to overcome this. But no matter what you're going through, mentally or physically, be open to the suggestions of others. Do what you need to do, and you cannot wait for life to come to you. You need to find ways to experience it and not make excuses for why you're not doing so. There's always going to be barriers. You need to find alternate routes to get there. And when trying new activities, don't go in with the assumption that you're going to succeed. It is nice to be good at something immediately, but something needs to be said for the growth one gains along the journey towards success. I'd like to take a quick second and point out that one of my teammates on screen is actually here with us this evening. Jess Dyko, in the top left corner. Hey, Jess. I'd like to share a story of courage and bravery at the Games in unforeseen circumstances. Early on in the competition, a teammate of mine by the name of Scott Snow fell out of his chair playing wheelchair rugby. He sustained a concussion and injured his right arm. His arm had to be mobilized, but he still had archery and rowing to compete in. If there was ever a moment in one's life where they needed to find a way, the Invictus Games was it. Surrounded by people from all walks of life who chose to keep pushing, despite every reason not to, Scott was no different. He was not going to disappoint his daughters by not competing in the other events he needed to compete still. So prior to his archery competition, he spent the entire day learning to shoot the bow with his mouth.
Scott, one arm bend.
what we're going to do. We're going to aim in the white. Let's drop it on high. Wait. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, that should be your last shot.
You got a bullseye, brother.
This story stands out to me and is a favorite of mine because it's a real-time example of how resilient the human spirit is. I should also mention that, like I said, Scott also had rowing to compete in, and so he had to pull the cable with his good arm. And that being said, acceptance of limitations was a given and never questioned. This was a home for respect. Now, that being said, despite everything that everyone had been through, there comes a time where you need to let your old self go. But as servicemen and women, that goes against everything we're taught. No one gets left behind. So what has the games taught me? Well, I can tell you that I've had some time to think about my experience overall, and there's a few points that stand out. Don't wait for others to experience life. So many times we feel the need to do or try an activity with others out of fear of looking alone or by ourselves. Trying to coordinate with others' schedules can be frustrating and a hassle. Don't be afraid of failure. Every experience, win or lose, is still an experience that you can learn from and grow. Learn from others. Seek out others and learn from their experiences. Oftentimes, you may be doing something that someone else has already found an easier way to do. There are so many people with incredible advice to give. You just have to find it. Advocate for yourself. You know your body best. If something looks off and feels wrong, get an opinion. And get a second and third if it isn't what you were looking for. Do the research into what you need to do to help yourself. But don't wait for others to help you. Success looks different for everyone. Compare your performance only to yourself and not others. We are not all that different, but our physical abilities are. So how has parasports impacted my life? Well, since participating, it has changed my mood in a positive way. I feel like I've gained a piece of my old competitive self back. I feel like I've recovered a piece of my old identity, and I began to mold a new one. One where I try an activity out of curiosity rather than expecting to succeed. My mindset has gone from, I think that I will be good at that, let's try that, to let's do that. That looks like fun. It has brought me closer to the parasport community that exists all around the world and the support that comes from that. I've been able to acquire knowledge and from the experiences and learn from their new ways to live comfortably. The metrics I use to define success have changed since my injury. In the past, it may have looked like scoring 20 points in a basketball game. Now it may look like making through the entire practice without pain or discomfort. The peaks and valleys of success and failure have given me an appreciation for the growth one gains along the journey towards proficiency and excellence. A journey that may lead to future competition under more bright lights. So I can tell you that my future in parasports is very unclear at this point in time. I'm still coping with my physical limitations and my injury. And learning to walk again still remains an important goal of mine. I had convinced myself that playing parasports was the equivalent to giving up on that goal. Part of me felt like I was being forced to play these adapted sports, rather than participate in them because I enjoyed them. I've since been able to separate the two from one another and use one to help me accomplish the other. After trying 3 of the sports, I'm unsure if I will continue with any of them. As it stands, there are many barriers to entry into adaptive sports, like cost, access to equipment, access to facilities, and any underlying medical conditions that prevent you from participating. I enjoy competing at an international event, and if I can find a sport that I love, I might consider making a run at the Paralympics. Speaking of which, I've recently traveled to Banff to try some winter adaptive sports. I was able to spend some time with adaptive skiing.
Leland, that was awesome.
Just when I got going, he stopped me, unfortunately. Just getting the hang of it. Trying that brings me to my next focus. The Invictus Games will be returning to Canada in February of 2025 in Vancouver and Whistler.
You are all Invictus.
For the first time ever, the Invictus Games 2025 will be hosting a summer-winter sport hybrid games. With the addition of alpine skiing, snowboarding, biathlon, Nordic skiing, skeleton, and wheelchair curling, along with some of the previous sports, such as indoor rowing, sitting volleyball, swimming, wheelchair basketball, and wheelchair rugby. I'm currently using my experience as a wheelchair user and past competitor to improve on the experience I had in Germany and work towards the best possible experience for all participants. So how can you get involved? There are a few ways you can get involved in order to make a difference in the lives of servicemen and women. You can donate directly to the Invictus Games Foundation. You can donate to True Patriot Love, and organizations whose areas of focus are supporting military families and prioritizing their well-being by improving rehabilitation and recovery and fostering connections in their community. You can donate to Soldier On, a program part of the Canadian Armed Forces, which contributes to the recovery of ill and injured members and veterans by providing opportunities and resources through sport and recreational activities in order to improve the quality of life of its members. And you can volunteer. So you can see, sometimes life doesn't go as planned. You don't always get what you want or what you had expected. I never could have imagined that I would be in this situation, nor did I ever want to be. Sometimes events occur completely out of your control. But eventually you must face your new reality. Over time, I've become more comfortable and confident with my new self, comfortable being seen in public in a wheelchair. I truly believe the experiences we have and the obstacles we face happen for a reason, as a way to help us grow and realize our true potential. I've been given some opportunities that I might not have been given otherwise, like speaking here today. I've made a plan to use my voice and share with all of you here my experience thus far in hopes of inspiring you to push past any mental and physical obstacles in your lives. Because a better tomorrow comes for those who seize today. Thank you. I'd like to open up the floor to questions, but I have a short little story before that. Let me say that there's no such thing as a silly question. I'd rather you ask them than do what my teammate Scott did. And he stabbed one of our teammates in the leg with a butter knife to see if he could feel his legs. So there's no such thing as a silly question. Thank you.
Dean? No. Yeah? We can hear me? I think it's on now. Okay. I think it is. We have a preemptive question, and I have lovely Allison who's going to model so that Dave can take a picture of it. I have to be louder? Oh, I'm sorry. Allison has a question, and Dave is going to take a photo of her asking it.
Dave, you might want to face the other way, because it's a real question. Leland, thank you so much for sharing with us, and thank you to the Whistler Institute for giving us this opportunity to hear your story. I sit on the board for Whistler Adaptive Sports, so they're one of the partnering organizations with Invictus, coming to Whistler specifically, and provide opportunities for children and youth with neurodivergent and disabilities to participate in sport in this community. So you shared some of your personal impacts in your presentation. So two-part question. My first question is, out of those impacts, what's the biggest one to you personally? And my second part of my question is, if you could just speak to the importance of organizations like Invictus Games or community-based organizations like Whistler Adaptive Sports in terms of the opportunities they provide people with disabilities, that would be fantastic.
I would say the biggest impact the sport has had on my life is being confident to go out into public and enjoy the activities that I once did. Being in a wheelchair, there's a lot of thought that has to go into to say, go to an NHL hockey game. How am I going to get there if I decide to drive or take a public transit? Where am I going to be sitting? Is there an accessible seating there that I may need to arrange with the Ticketmaster to get those tickets purchased? And so sport has given me the confidence to find ways to enjoy life again. And just like in basketball and other sports, that if one thing isn't going the right way, you need to find another way. And so in basketball, if you dribble with your right hand and you're only good with your right hand, the defender might know that. Whereas if you learn to use your left hand, you may find an alternate route to get to the basket. And so with life and in sport, it's given me the confidence to find alternate ways to where I want to go. And speaking on charitable organizations, I have experience with Rocky Mountain Adaptive in Banff. And so those organizations are so crucial to giving people the opportunity to experience things that they may not have otherwise had the opportunity. Rocky Mountain Adaptive was very courteous and very, very compassionate to the needs as a wheelchair user. They were more than accommodating with meeting me at the base of the hill and riding the gondola up with me. I had never done that before. And so not only providing the opportunity to try adaptive skiing, but it also instills confidence in people to yeah, you can do this. We'll help you, and you can learn from how you did it, and then you can go forward doing things on your own again.
I'm going to have to speak for my partner, Nancy. Okay. Her experience going to the Invictus Games in Germany, she felt that the accessibility for all of the wasn't there. Why? There was no closed captions, there was no interpreters, there was nothing for her, for the military with the hearing loss. And she felt the same because she's deafblind. And she comes here tonight and she saw that you have captions up there, you have the interpreter here, and she felt so enjoyable and so included in everything. It's just so wonderful. She's about to cry because she feels included finally, being deafblind, that it's... And she saw my experience of me learning sign because of my hearing loss as it gets worse, and having to constantly do what you did the same. Like, I have to push myself, asking the people for, and organizers for the captioning, or for an interpreter, or for a light at the swimming to start, because my coach had to tap my leg. And so thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For doing that and being a voice.
I would say that once you've expressed an interest in coming to listen to this evening, I made an effort to go through all my videos and put in captions, because I hadn't thought about that, and I'm glad that now I have it. And I wanted to thank Mandy for arranging for the interpreters to come. It sounds like it was quite the task, but she came through, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Good evening. Leland, I firstly want to say thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And thank you to, please introduce me again to
Jess and Nancy.
Jess and Nancy,
yeah.
Thank you for your service. I wanted to ask you about your mindset and your change from, as you mentioned, being a very goal-oriented, not necessarily competition, but end goal-focused person prior to your injury, and how that shifted post-injury. As you said, you're at some point, I'm paraphrasing, that when you were looking at sports in the past, you were looking at, would I be good at this? Could I compete? Could I achieve? Could I get this amount of goals or the success in that sport? And can you talk to about how that shifted in terms of wanting to be involved in participation, etc.? I love the difference because I work in the space and familiar with Soldier On and the Invictus Games and the difference between the two.
For sure.
But I'm just wondering if you could explain a little bit about how that's changed for you, because I think that's important to a lot of us in the room and a lot of the people that we work with, about how to balance that.
Yeah, so just to paraphrase, in that prior to my injury, I was a very competitive person, and I would only choose sports or activities if I knew that I could succeed in them and be better than average. And it's not the best mentality to have. And because there's a lot of sports and activities that I didn't try because I was afraid of looking clumsy or uncoordinated in that activity. And since my injury, I'm very much at the mercy of my physical limitations. I'm paralyzed from about here, and below that, around here, there is, I have very little core function and muscles in my back. And so for me to, say, lean forward here and then sit back up, wasn't able to do that 6 years ago. I've gained a lot more strength in that particular exercise. And so I'm more realistic with what I can and can't do. And by choosing to try an activity out of curiosity and just fun. I'm not limiting myself and what I might be missing out on. Trying that adaptive skiing, I actually met a competitor at the Invictus Games, and she had mentioned it, and I was kind of on the fence, you know, how would I put on a pair of ski pants, and how would I put a pair of boots on, you know? My level of impairment in my feet is very limited, so trying to wiggle a foot into a boot is very difficult. And so there are all these different things I had to consider to try it, but I found a way. And I made do with what I had, and because I'm willing to find a way, I'm opening doors to much more than what I would have prior to than expecting to just do something because I wanted to succeed at it and be proficient already. So that's kind of my new mindset now.
Apologies, I forgot my second question. When are you going to come sit skiing in Whistler?
Maybe this winter I might make the trek out here.
Good, I can recommend a couple of instructors.
For sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, both you and Jess. My question is one more of logistics, of how somebody who faces the challenges that you face and the other athletes, how do you go about selecting and competing and participating when any one of us without challenges like you're facing would have difficulty and be challenged?
Yeah.
How do people, the community that faces these challenges, how do they select and how do they move forward into these different sports? I'm looking at skeleton. I've been involved with the sliding center since the beginning. I know what that takes. I mean, how would somebody choose to participate in that versus basketball or skiing or some of these other winter sports?
I've gone to a couple adaptive sport expos or kind of show and tells basically in Winnipeg, where a lot of the local sport organizers for all the different wheelchair basketball, rugby, and I've had a chance to try some of the sports at these expos firsthand and talk to the coaches that maybe run those local teams and ask them, you know, do you have equipment available that that I can borrow? For myself, Wheelchair Basketball Manitoba was the local club that I had coordinated with in Winnipeg, training for the games, and I was very fortunate that they had a chair for wheelchair basketball that I was able to borrow and use, and organizations like Rocky Mountain Adaptive and Whistler Adaptive are so crucial to giving people the opportunity and bringing awareness to what's out there. And I think for myself, going to Banff, I didn't know what to expect. Just type it into Google, adaptive skiing Banff, and sure enough, Rocky Mountain Adaptive came up, and Whistler Adaptive as well. And so I think a part of it falls on the person, the individual, to maybe look to see what's out there, but having events where people can try different activities really gives them the opportunity to get in the equipment and see what works, what doesn't work. And I think coaches and people with adaptive equipment are very willing to work with the individuals to find a solution. So as much exposure as possible and is crucial to getting people into these sports.
Thank you. Thank you.
Leland, thank you so much. Very interesting and also inspirational. What role is technology playing in rehabilitation in your journey? You're looking ahead. Do you see things like exoskeletons and other technologies, stimulus technologies how do you balance between hopefulness of that and realistic?
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk is getting pretty adventurous with the Neuralink, and there's all, like you said, exoskeletons and different spinal implants that already exist out there. And I know a couple individuals that have undergone the surgeries. someone that went to Thailand, paid $100,000 to have a little microchip implanted in his spine. And the way the device works is it has a little computer, and it sends an electrical signal to the different muscles in his spine and helps him to activate those muscles when he needs to. And for myself, one, the cost is a huge gateway or barrier to these types of technologies. I don't have $100,000 sitting around, but I'm very apprehensive about these technologies, especially the surgery ones. I'm worried that it might make my situation worse, and until I can be guaranteed 100% that any kind of surgery that I agree to go under the knife for will benefit me, then for the time being, I'm content with the progress I've had just doing physiotherapy. So I think the technology is good, but I think we need to make sure that it's not going to make situations worse for the people that agree to have it done to them. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for sharing your story. I'm a teacher in Pemberton, elementary teacher, and we always love talking about growth mindset and inspirational stories and motivation, and the idea of, like you said, failure can help us succeed.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, with the Invictus Games coming up, and do you have any advice for kids around failure and succeeding, and then also, would you be interested in talking to kids? Because
sure.
I know they love the Olympics and they love
Yeah.
cheering for Canada, so this would
Yeah.
be a really great story
Yeah.
for the schools to hear.
For sure, yeah. I've spoke for a classroom in Winnipeg, so I'm more than willing to arrange that with you. But I can say that, like I said, prior to my injury, I would pick up any sport, be better than average, and was okay with how I felt. But the feeling of accomplishment I gained after picking up a new sport, never tried it before, and failing after failing after failing, and finally, succeeding was far greater than just being good at something immediately. I would take that feeling over the ladder any day. You're like, you start something and you're not good, and then one day something clicks and it's like, wow, I can do that, and that feeling is much better than immediately being able to be good at something from the start.
Hi, Leland. It's kind of a two-part question. First of all, I'm curious, where do you feel like you draw the biggest support in your life for pushing you forward? And then also, on the other side, where do you feel is kind of a gap in some barriers or the support that you have in your life right now and the goals that you have?
I would say friends and family are a huge support. Early on in my injury, a lot of friends kind of distanced themselves from me because they weren't sure how to accommodate my new physical abilities. I stopped getting invited to different events, parties, what have you. And that was tough. And there were a few people that stuck around. Rachel, my friend here.
I wasn't setting that question up for that answer, I promise.
That were more than willing to learn how to live life in a wheelchair with me. And were willing to accommodate any needs that I needed. And it has been a bit of a learning experience for family members. My mother learning to discover that she doesn't have to help me with everything that I, need to do throughout the day. My dad learning to come to terms with my new physical limitations. He was very proud of me for being in the military and whatnot. And being in my new self has been difficult for him, but I think family and friends are the biggest support. And there are different organizations. For instance, in Manitoba, there's Spinal Cord Injury of Manitoba. There's also brain injury associations. In Manitoba, Manitoba Brain Injury. And I'm sure that I hope that there's things like this out in BC, but those sorts of organizations are so important because they put you in contact with people that are going through similar injuries and illnesses in life. And it's important for those organizations to continue operating or be created if they aren't. So, yeah.
And then the other part, feel like where you're experiencing some gaps in support?
Yeah, again, like there are resources, like I said, these different organizations for different injuries and illnesses, but I also think sometimes people don't necessarily know where to turn or that these organizations exist. How people discover them, I think in the hospital is a huge way to bring people in contact, put people in contact with such organizations that do exist. That's how I was introduced to Spinal Cord Injury of Manitoba and all the resources that they offer. So it's good that they exist, but I think making sure that people know they exist, but also funding for these organizations that do provide services. So they're there, but I think we need to do more with more of them and more funding for them.
Thanks, Mandy. So you mentioned fun and curiosity, and like jumping off of the growth mindset question. I'm sure that wasn't really what you were taught in the military. So, and you know, like you weren't feeling that in the beginning either of your injury. So was there a moment or tools or anything that kind of got you into that mindset? Or did it just take a long time to get there and now that's the perspective you have on life? Because I feel like that's amazing. Fun and curiosity are important.
Yeah, I would say it has been a journey to develop that new mindset of trying things for curiosity into what they are and how they'll make me feel rather than accepting to be that way. It hasn't been easy. It's been a huge humbling experience, failing over and over and over again until finally succeeding. The military, they instill a lot of discipline and expect you to be able to perform almost relatively instantly, and there isn't a lot of time to fail at something. In fact, when things don't go the right way or people do fail at their jobs, that's when lives are lost. And so it has been difficult to come to that realization that, hey, you're not in the military anymore, it's okay to fail at something. And the feeling I get from that, succeeding after failure, is much better than, like I said, immediately being able to do something from the get-go.
Sorry, thanks so much. Firstly, thank you so much for coming out tonight. But obviously, with all that you've gone through, from like a whole mental health aspect, I can't imagine it's been the easiest. So have you ever felt yourself like kind of being drawn towards like bad habits, be it like alcohol or drugs, and kind of how would you overcome that kind of going forward?
For sure, yeah. So because of my injury, I suffer from chronic pain. The signals from my brains to my muscles and my legs, my lower extremities, is kind of fuzzy, almost like static on a TV. And as a result, my glutes and hamstrings are on fire all the time. Even as we sit right now, I'm extremely uncomfortable. It almost feels like someone twisting the skin on your arm, you know, those classic snake bite you get as a kid or something like that. That's what it feels like all the time. And over time, I've kind of got used to it, but I still have kind of managed to tolerate it. But it wasn't easy, and alcohol was one thing that I fell back on and used as a kind of like a pain medicine almost. And I eventually realized that having a drink every day wasn't the best road to take. Alcoholism runs in my family, and I was always kind of aware of I am susceptible to this, and there wasn't one moment where there was a medical emergency that I stopped drinking as much as I was. It was just hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing this as often as you was. But when I was, intoxicated, there was no pain, and I was able to be myself. And it's extremely difficult to be yourself when you're just in constant chronic pain all the time. And it's difficult to not rely on those substances. There was a point where I was in such a dark place that I thought about harming myself. And I was fortunate enough to have a friend that had a brain injury and a spinal cord injury, who has since recovered from both, who was able to guide me and steer me clear of those kinds of thoughts and substances. So having friends and family and any kind of mental health resources are so important, because if I didn't have that support, I may not be here today.
Do you have a question, Tom? Nope. I have a question, Leland. What sort of misconceptions are there for people with disabilities?
I think that we are not all helpless. We all don't need help with every aspect of our days. I'm able to cook and clean and bathe myself and drive even. I just do it differently than some people. A lot of our injuries and illnesses aren't necessarily visible. Myself, I'm in a wheelchair. You can see that there's something different about me. And someone like Jess, you wouldn't necessarily know that she has a hard time hearing. And so I think people being more aware of those around them, but also not making assumptions about someone and what they can or can't do. And you're allowed to help people. If you ever see somebody in a wheelchair, you're allowed to approach them and ask them if they need help. Don't just assume that you can start pushing them or whatnot. That can also maybe sometimes cause more harm. So we're not all that helpless. We're not helpless, and we're actually quite capable in doing some things. I mean, have you ever seen? I imagine. Have you ever thought about how difficult it is to run blind in the Paralympics? I don't think people realize how difficult some of the sports in the Paralympics is for people to do. Swimming with one arm. So I think people assume that we aren't capable, but we truly are.
I have a bit of a follow-up to that. So, considering the games are coming to Whistler in February, what can we do as a community to be welcoming to athletes?
Yeah, go to the venues and support them when they're competing, and talk to them. They don't pretend that they're invisible. You know, go up to them if you're able to, get close to them, talk to them, ask them about their story and the journey they've had to get to there. It means a lot that for someone who has no idea who you are, the name you are, to be cheering for you. When I was competing in hand cycling, I was coming down the home stretch and there were a bunch of people waving the Canada flag. They had no idea who I was, but they saw the Canada flag on my uniform, and that meant so much, you know, to be able to represent your country again and wear that flag and to know people that recognize you for that logo on your chest or your shoulder. So support and going out to the events, I think, is a huge way to support the athletes.
Does anybody have any more questions? Oh.
Thank you, Leland. That was awesome. Given I am is the motto of the Invictus Games, can you just share your I am?
Refusing to quit.
Thank you.
I think that's a good thing to end on.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so thank you, Leland. And thank you, everyone. For those of you who are interested in chatting with Leland or staying for a bit more of a conversation, we do have some snacks in the gallery, and the bar will stay open for a little bit. I think that's all.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Pardon? That was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. And I do have a gift for
Oh,
you.
thank you. I'll get Rachel to take that for me, but
great.
yeah, I'm just gonna